Sam once believed would crash into your life like a storm, loud, violent, impossible to miss. In truth, it arrives quietly, in small things, in a cover my shift, in a familiar truck parked where it shouldn't be, in a whispered voice behind a closed bedroom door. That cold November morning, the wind cut like knives. Sam was sick, exhausted, barely standing. He worked anyway. He always worked unless he was in the hospital. By mid-morning, he was so dizzy his foreman Arturo sent him home. Sam didn't argue. He drove back coughing until his ribs hurt. All he wanted was a hot shower and sleep. But when he turned onto his street, something hit him instantly. His brother Jimmy's truck was in the driveway. Jimmy, who had called the night before saying he was out of town and needed Sam to cover for him. There was no reason for that truck to be there. Sam didn't pull in. He parked at the end of the street, walked along the houses, slipped in through the side door. The stairs creaked as he went up, heart hammering like a fist inside his chest. At the bedroom door, he stopped, listening. There were noises, movement, and then, "Oh God, yes, Jimmy," Camilla moaned. Camilla, his wife, that was enough. Sam closed his eyes. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered as he lifted his phone and hit record. His hands shook. "Jimmy asked me to cover his shift so he could screw my wife," he whispered into the mic. "Let's see how this plays out." He kicked the door open. They didn't even notice him at first. Jimmy was too busy. Camilla too. Sam stood there a few seconds, watching the life he built collapse. On a silent count of 3, he launched a hard kick straight into Jimmy's ribs. Jimmy hit the floor like a dropped tool bag. Camilla screamed, scrambling for a blanket. Sam stepped around the bed. His fists clenched, but he didn't swing again. In his mind, he already heard jail doors slamming if he went any further. Jimmy didn't move. He knew he'd lose. A memory flashed. Thanksgiving 2 years ago, when Jimmy challenged him to an arm wrestling match to show who's boss. Sam had casually held him in place, checked his watch, then slammed Jimmy's hand into the table like it was nothing. The room went silent. Jimmy never got over it. The truth was, Jimmy had always bullied him. The firstborn, the heir, the favorite. Their sister Stephanie was the adored youngest. And Sam, the middle one, was always expected to be reliable, quiet, useful. He drove Steph everywhere after he got his license. He covered for Jimmy constantly. He did his part without complaining. And now he'd come home sick, drained, broken, and found his brother in his bed with his wife. There was no screaming. Jimmy scrambled into his clothes and ran. Camilla packed in silence and walked out 20 minutes later. The house was Sam's long before the marriage, thanks to a prenup. He didn't hesitate. He called his lawyer, signed power of attorney, gave instructions for the divorce, and disappeared. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Cold, clean, done. But nothing was really over. Sam didn't go far, just far enough to breathe. Before vanishing completely, he stopped by his parents' house. He laid everything out, photos, texts, recordings, every proof of betrayal. Their reaction was ice cold. "You need to move on," his father Jacob said calmly. "Jimmy was always meant to take over the company," his mother Evelyn added. Steph crossed her arms and shrugged. "So she picked your brother. People change." That night, Sam made a silent vow. "I won't come back until I've taken everything from them." Then Camilla told him one last truth. She'd been sleeping with Jimmy only weeks after the wedding. Many times Sam covered shifts for Jimmy. His brother was with her, and she was pregnant with Jimmy's child. Sam left, completely. He joined the Army Corps of Engineers, went back to school, earned a civil engineering degree, then an MBA. While his family assumed he was hiding, he was rebuilding himself. In the Army, he rose fast. He trained in combat, weapons, survival, hired former special ops to sharpen him further. 6 months later, he was a captain. They asked him to re-enlist. He almost agreed. Then the explosion happened. An IED detonated under their vehicle on the way to a construction site. Sam regained consciousness under gunfire, bleeding, disoriented. Nearby, the member of parliament they were escorting was trapped in wreckage, her legs shredded, blood pouring. He dragged her out, stopping the bleeding under fire. He held the perimeter until helicopters arrived. When medics reached them, his body finally collapsed. Darkness. He woke up staring into green eyes beneath fiery red hair. "Am I dead?" he whispered. The woman raised an eyebrow. "Why would you think that?" "I didn't expect to survive," he murmured. "And waking up to someone like you feels like the afterlife." She laughed softly. "Sorry to disappoint. I'm not an angel. I'm a lawyer." Her name was Rebecca Caulfield. The woman he saved, June, was her sister. They both stayed by Sam's side throughout recovery. When Sam was discharged, he carried a silver star, a Purple Heart, and a growing bond with Rebecca that soon turned into love. He told her everything about his past: Jimmy, Camilla, his parents, the betrayal. Rebecca listened, thoughtful, sharp, and one day she said, "What if we don't just beat them? What if we burn their whole world down?" Her family was wealthy, powerful. Within weeks, they formed an LLC. On paper, Rebecca's father was president, her brother CFO, and Rebecca CEO. Sam's name appeared nowhere, yet he ran everything behind the scenes. They bought one failing construction firm, then another, and another. Within a year, they owned 7 all profitable under Sam's command. Then they attacked. 2 shell investors coordinated by Rebecca's brother quietly accumulated shares in Sam's family company. When the threshold was reached, an emergency board meeting was called. Stephanie was pacing outside, nervous. Through the glass, she saw a tall man watching from across the street. Something in him felt familiar. A bus passed. When it moved on, he was gone. Inside, a poised brunette stood. "I move to dismiss the current board chairman for gross mismanagement." Jimmy, Jacob, Evelyn, and Stephanie all voted no. 49%. Then the door opened. "Samuel Johnson, 12%, the secretary called. The room froze. Sam lifted his hand. Yes, the motion passed. Jacob was removed as chairman. Jimmy fired as CEO. Stephanie stripped as CFO. New leadership took their places. Company assets, houses, vehicles, accounts were reclaimed. They had 10 minutes to clear out. Jimmy and Camilla had 24 hours. Sam led the meeting calmly while his family sat speechless. Then came the final blow. SRJ Enterprises, Samuel, Rebecca, June issued a takeover offer. Anyone holding shares after they reached 51% would see the value drop from $120 to $2. Within hours, Sam gained full control. His family lost everything. Eventually, they moved into a tiny apartment. Jacob ranted all day. Evelyn babysat for Jimmy and Camilla, who were struggling to pay rent. Their savings evaporated. One afternoon, Camilla came to Sam's office. "Please, can Jimmy come home? He's working out of state. We barely see him. I miss my husband." Sam tilted his head. "He has a job, a real one. I won't fire someone loyal just to move him." She broke down, crying, begging. Sam listened, stone-faced. Then the speaker on his desk crackled. June, Rebecca, Stephanie. All 3 had been silently listening from the start. None of them believed a word Camilla said. She tried another angle. "I'll do anything," she whispered, stepping closer, hoping he'd take the bait, hoping she could seduce him again. Before Sam could answer, June's voice cut through the speaker, mocking and cruel. Well, well. Desperate already? Remember when we joked about adding a third? Saturday works for me." Stephanie snorted. "Sunday too." Camilla went pale. Sam smirked. 2 days later, she stumbled into work with trembling hands and divorce papers in her grip. Jimmy was leaving her. Someone had sent him explicit photos, clear, undeniable. She screamed, begged, collapsed. Everyone heard. Sam sat still. "I gave you a second chance," he said quietly. "And after everything you did to me, I still hoped you'd find decency. Guess Stephanie was the only one worth saving." He fired Camilla on the spot. Her life fell apart. Years passed. Stephanie rebuilt her relationship with Sam. She fell in love with June, came out openly, cut ties with the family that drowned her with them. Sam protected Jimmy and Camilla's kids, giving them opportunities their parents no longer had. And Sam, wealthy, powerful, respected, stood at the top of the empire he built from ashes. The people who betrayed him lost everything, and he never once apologized for taking it all. For Sam, revenge didn't feel like fire. It felt like paperwork. Stock transfers, sign-offs, signatures across the bottom of thick contracts. One quiet meeting after another until the Johnson name slipped off the building and a new sign went up. SRJ Enterprises. The first time Sam saw the new logo lit up at night, Rebecca slid her arm through his. "How does it feel?" she asked. He thought about it. "Like balance," he said finally. "Not justice, just balance." He meant it. But balance didn't make nights less complicated. Sometimes he woke up sweating, convinced he was still in his old bedroom, listening to Camilla's voice saying his brother's name. Other nights he dreamed about his father's face in that boardroom. Not angry, just stunned, like the world had cheated him instead of the other way around. He told himself he didn't care. Most days it was even true. Stephanie adjusted faster than anyone expected. The first week as June's assistant, she arrived early, stayed late, and didn't complain when June barked orders in a tone that would have made most new hires crumble. Steph just nodded, took notes, and brought back results. In the evening, she went home with June to the apartment they now shared. There, the steel melted. She cooked, laughed, told embarrassing stories about growing up with Jimmy, and listened as June talked about the missions she'd been on and the scars nobody could see. When they were alone, Steph didn't feel like a Johnson. She felt like a person. That was new. One night, lying on the couch with June's head in her lap, she asked, "Do you ever think Sam went too far?" June didn't answer at first. She traced small circles on Steph's knee. "I think he went as far as they pushed him," she said eventually. "If they'd stopped earlier, so would he." Steph stared at the ceiling. "I keep replaying it," she whispered. "Every time he came to me asking if he was overreacting, and I told him to swallow it, to keep the peace. I was so afraid of losing my place that I helped cut his away instead." June turned onto her side and looked up. "You're here now," she said. "You can't rewrite the past, but you can decide what you do with the rest of it." Steph swallowed hard. "I know." There was a pause. "And my mother?" she asked. "Do you think he ever forgives her?" June didn't lie. "No," she said. "I don't." Jacob and Evelyn took longer to realize how bad things really were. For a while, they kept expecting a call. Old clients, old friends, someone, anyone, stepping in to say, "Don't worry, we've got you." The Johnsons had built half this town. People owed them. No one came. Word spread quickly in construction. Everyone knew which projects SRJ had rescued, which suppliers they favored, which firms they quietly blacklisted. Nobody wanted to be on Sam's bad side. Jacob sat at the kitchen table of their cramped apartment, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. "This is temporary," he said for the third time that week. Evelyn didn't answer. She was trying to calculate how long they could stretch what was left of their savings. Social Security checks came, but medicine cost more every month. Jimmy and Camilla were barely staying afloat as it was, and their rent was 2 payments from overdue. They tried lawyers, small ones, desperate ones. The little firm they hired lasted exactly 1 court session before walking off the case the moment Rebecca introduced herself and laid her business card on the table. Back at the office, Jacob shouted until the walls shook. "He's our son," he roared at the partners. "You're telling me you're scared of some outsider more than you're loyal to a family who built this town?" The older partner smoothed his tie and spoke carefully. "We're loyal to staying open," he replied. "You didn't tell us you were going up against Rebecca Caulfield. She doesn't just win for her clients, she enjoys erasing people who cross her. We have staff and families too. We're out." Evelyn grabbed her purse, cheeks flushed with humiliation. "This isn't over," Jacob snapped on the way out. But as the months dragged on, not over started to look a lot like nothing left to try. Sam didn't think about them much, not deliberately. His days were full. He spent mornings in meetings, afternoons on sites, evenings planning expansions with Rebecca and June. On weekends, he and Rebecca toured venues for their wedding and argued over guest lists. "Invite who you want," Rebecca said one evening as they sat on their balcony, looking over the city lights. "Friends, colleagues, we have enough found family to fill a hall." "What about the ones I didn't find?" Sam asked quietly. She didn't pretend not to know what he meant. "Do you want them there?" she asked. He pictured his father sitting stiff in a pew, his mother judging the flowers, Jimmy rolling his eyes, Camilla smiling like she hadn't destroyed his life. No, he said. Then there's your answer. They sent no invitation. Instead, the front row filled with people who'd nearly died with him, worked with him, rebuilt things beside him. June stood beside Rebecca. Stephanie sat in the second row, hands clasped, watching her brother say vows he actually meant this time. Later at the reception, Steph slipped away to the terrace, wiping her eyes. Sam followed a few minutes later. You okay? He asked. She laughed, a little shaky. I'm sitting at a wedding where my brother is marrying a woman my parents would call a shark in heels, while I'm dating her sister and living in sin, also in heels. So, no, not okay, but in a good way. He smiled, leaning on the railing beside her. I'm still not used to this version of you, he admitted. Same, she said. Half the time I still expect Mom to walk in and tell me I'm embarrassing the family. She already did, he reminded her. And you're still here. Steph looked over at him. Thank you, she said suddenly. For what? For letting me try again. You didn't owe me that. Not even a little. He considered this. You're the only one who ever came looking, he said. Everyone else waited for me to crawl back. You showed up and said you were wrong. I believed you. Do you regret that? Not so far. Steph blinked hard, turned away, and pretended to be fascinated by the city. Good, she said, because I'm not going anywhere. Jimmy lasted a year out of state before he broke. He called one night while Sam was going through site reports. Sam! Sam recognized the number and voice immediately. He almost hung up. What do you want? Work. Closer to home, Jimmy said. No small talk, no fake warmth, just exhaustion. I'll take whatever you give me. I'm done chasing road jobs. Sam breathed slowly through his nose. You divorced Camilla, he said. Yeah. You threw her out. She earned it. You did too, Sam reminded him. But nobody threw you out until you ran out of options. Silence. Are you going to help me or not? Jimmy asked finally. Sam thought of his nephews and niece, the way they'd clung to his legs the few times he'd seen them at drop-offs and neutral places. They hadn't asked to be born into this. I'll transfer you in 6 months if your site supervisor says you pull your weight, Sam said. No promotions, no special favors. You show up, you work, you go home. This isn't a path back to power, it's a paycheck. Jimmy swallowed. Fine. And Jimmy, Sam added, you ever so much as raise your voice to anyone on my crew the way you did to me growing up, and you're gone. No warnings. Jimmy didn't say thank you, but he didn't argue either. Steph heard about the call later. She found Sam alone in his office, staring out the window. You didn't have to do that, she said gently. I didn't do it for him, Sam replied. I did it so his kids don't end up watching their dad fall apart. She nodded. You know Mom and Dad would say, that proves you're still soft, she said. Mom and Dad aren't in the room, he answered. That's the difference. Camilla's spiral went faster. Without Jimmy, without the job at SRJ, she burned through what little money she had left. Landlords didn't take apologies as payment. Neither did grocery stores. She tried calling Sam twice more. He blocked her number. She tried showing up at the office. Security turned her away. Eventually, she stopped trying, because there was nothing left to barter with. The last anyone heard, she was living with a cousin in another city, working nights at a bar, and fighting for supervised visitation in a crowded family court system that didn't care how big her eyes got when she cried. Sam didn't follow the details. If he happened to hear her name, he let it pass through him like static. There were limits to how much space he was willing to let old ghosts rent in his head. Jacob's health broke before his pride did. The first heart scare sent him to the hospital overnight. The doctors told him to slow down, to avoid stress. He laughed in their faces. What's stress? He barked. I used to run a company. Now I sit on a couch and watch daytime TV. If I slow down anymore, I'll be in a coma. But the second scare came 6 months later, and the third 8 months after that. This time he didn't bounce back as quickly. He sat at the little kitchen table, thinner now, staring at a foreclosure notice on Jimmy and Camilla's old house someone had mailed by mistake. All that land, all that money, all those years. Gone. He cursed Sam daily. He turned his back on family, Jacob said to anyone who'd listen. All for what? Some outsider lawyer and a fat bank account. Ungrateful brat. Evelyn didn't argue out loud, but at night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the day Sam had shown up with evidence of the affair, the way she told him to get over it so they could keep pretending everything was fine. She remembered his face going still, how he'd never raised his voice, how that made it worse. She didn't reach for the phone. Pride was bone deep. It held even when everything else tired out. She and Jacob heard about his wedding through gossip. They told themselves they wouldn't have gone, even if they were invited. That woman's brainwashed him, Jacob muttered. She's using our son to grow her empire. Evelyn stayed quiet. She remembered Rebecca's eyes in the courtroom, cold, bright, assessing. She had the uneasy sense that whatever empire existed now was built by both of them, brick by brick, choice by choice, and that their son would never have needed it if she and Jacob had chosen differently when he stood in their living room 10 years earlier, begging them to see him. The first time Sam ran into his mother after everything, it happened by accident. He and Stephanie were cutting through a grocery store on the older side of town. It was closer to several sites, easy for quick coffee and snacks. Steph was halfway through complaining about a spreadsheet when she suddenly went silent. Sam looked up. Evelyn stood at the end of the aisle, a basket hanging from her arm. She'd gone gray faster than he expected. The last decade had etched deep lines into her face. For a second, she looked like she might drop the pasta box in her hand. "Sam," she breathed. He froze. Stephanie's fingers dug into his sleeve. He could feel the tremor in her hand. "Hey, Mom," Steph said carefully. Evelyn's eyes flicked to her daughter, then back to her middle child. "You look older," she said, which was true but not what she'd meant to say. Sam didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just watched her. "How are you?" she asked. It came out strange, like a question she'd forgotten how to form. "Busy," he said. Evelyn nodded, eyes glistening. "I heard you married," she said. "That she's a lawyer." "Her name's Rebecca," he answered. "Yes." "And you and Steph, you work together?" Steph's voice was tight. "I work for June, Rebecca's sister." "Oh." Evelyn swallowed. For a moment she looked like she might say something sharp about that, something about sin and shame and what people would think. Then she looked at Steph properly. Really looked. At her relaxed posture, her steady gaze, the small but unmistakable glow of someone no longer hiding. Instead of judgment, something like grief crossed Evelyn's face. "I never wanted my children to be afraid of me," she whispered. "You didn't have to want it," Steph said softly. "You just had to let it happen." Evelyn flinched as if struck. "I made mistakes," she said. Sam almost laughed. The word felt so small in her mouth, like calling a hurricane a bit of weather. "Yeah," he said. "You did." She blinked fast. "I'm not asking you to forgive us," she began. "I know," he interrupted. "You never asked for anything. You just expected it." They stared at each other over a row of canned tomatoes. "And if I ask now?" she said quietly. He pictured a decade of silence, the night they'd told him not to split the family, the way they'd welcomed Camilla and Jimmy into holidays like nothing had happened, the lawsuit, the courtroom, all the times they could have called and didn't. Behind him, he felt Stephanie's fear, her hope, her quiet plea sitting in his ribs like a stone. "If you're asking for a relationship," he said at last, "the answer is no." She paled. "If you're asking whether I wish you were starving or homeless, also no," he added. "You're my parents. I don't want you to die on the street, but I'm not coming back to that house. There is no going back for me." Evelyn swallowed. "What does that leave?" "A line," he said. "On one side, you stay alive. On the other, you stay out of my life. I'll make sure you have enough money not to worry about bills. But there's nothing else left between us." Stephanie's hand tightened again, but she didn't speak. She understood. This was the mercy Sam could offer without betraying himself. Evelyn stared at him for a long time. Her lips trembled. "I don't deserve even that," she whispered. "You're right," he said. "But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it so my sister doesn't spend the next 20 years watching you crumble." He turned his card away. Steph followed. Sam, Evelyn called. He paused but didn't look back. I love you, she said. It wasn't a weapon this time. It sounded more like a confession, or an apology she didn't know how to shape. He nodded once, just enough that she could see it, and walked away. Later in the car, Steph stared straight ahead. I don't know if I could have done that, she said quietly. Done what? Looked her in the eye and told her no. Sam drove in silence for a moment. For 10 years, they never once wondered if I was eating, he said. Now they'll never have to. That's more generosity than they ever showed me. It's enough. Do you think she meant it? Steph asked. When she said she loves you? Yeah, he said. I also think she loves control and image and convenience more. I'm not interested in sorting those out anymore. Steph let out a shaky breath. I'm proud of you, she said. He glanced over. She didn't sound like a little sister then. She sounded like someone who'd had to unlearn the same lessons he had. I'm proud of you too, he replied. She smiled, eyes shimmering. Good, then we're even. As the years passed, Johnson became less a name and more a story people told. New employees at SRJ heard rumors. They whispered about the quiet CEO who'd engineered a hostile takeover of his own family's company. The ruthless, red-headed lawyer who'd crushed every legal challenge. The CFO who used to be on the other side and was now dating the COO. Some of the rumors were true. Some were wild exaggerations. Sam didn't bother correcting them. He knew the real story. The nights, the choices, the lines he'd crossed and the ones he'd refused to. That was enough. One evening, sitting on the same balcony where he'd once promised Rebecca balance, he watched the city glow. Revenge, he realized, hadn't healed him. It had cleared the field. The real work, the fragile, daily work, was choosing what to plant where the wreckage used to be. Trust that could be broken but hadn't been yet. Love that didn't use obligation as a leash. Family that wasn't dictated by blood but by behavior. Rebecca stepped out, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. You're brooding, she said, handing him one. I'm thinking, he corrected. Dangerous. Always. She leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? She asked. What we did? He sipped his coffee. No, he said. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it. She nodded. Good, she said. Because we have a meeting with the board tomorrow, and I'd hate for you to suddenly grow a conscience. He laughed quietly. I have a conscience, he said. I just stopped letting the wrong people use it against me. From the street below came the sound of traffic, distant and steady. Somewhere across town, Jacob and Evelyn watched the same sky from a smaller window. Jimmy put his kids to bed, tired but still showing up. Camilla hovered on the edges of their lives like a ghost, fading further every year. And Sam sat between his wife and the future he'd carved with his own hands, finally understanding something simple he'd never been allowed to believe back then. Family wasn't the people who shared your name. It was the people who, when everything fell apart, didn't ask you to bleed quietly for their comfort. Those were the ones worth keeping.